Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Those words of Jesus are loved, and rightly so, the world over. But right before them, Jesus makes a stunning claim about himself, which when we put it together with those words, make that offer even more wonderful than it might seem at first. Well, hello and welcome to the weekly message from Knightswood United Free Church in Glasgow. My name is Sam, and we're going to be thinking about those words today and about what Jesus is claiming in them. This is part of a short series about Jesus in his own words, asking what Jesus said about himself, what he claimed, and what that can tell us about him and who he really was. Let me read our passage for this week first. All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him. Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened, and I will give you rest. Take my yoke upon you and learn from me, for I am gentle and humble in heart, and you will find rest for your souls. For my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, in these words, we see Jesus Christ as teacher. That's what this offer here is. When he says, take my yoke upon you and learn from me, he's offering to teach us. And in fact, that was an image that teachers, rabbis of the period used. A yoke was a piece of wood used to bind together two animals, usually oxen, as they pulled a plough or a cart. And because the oxen have to submit to the person driving them, it was a picture of submitting to someone else. When an enemy was conquered, they were said to take on the yoke of their conqueror. When you went to learn from a rabbi, you were said to take on his yoke. You were submitting to his way of doing things. And Jesus is saying, come to me, submit to my way of doing things, and I will teach you. I am the teacher who will teach you. In the next few minutes, we're going to see a few different things. We're going to see what kind of teacher he is. We're going to see who he teaches. We're going to see what he teaches. And finally, what the result of that teaching is. But this offer is an offer to take that yoke, to submit to him, to learn from this great teacher. And the result is not merely knowledge, but rest. Now, firstly, this passage tells us what kind of teacher Jesus is. Now, it's already clear from what we've read that Jesus offers to teach us something that no one else can or will. That he's claiming to be a teacher like no one else, with access to knowledge no one else can teach. And of course there are some teachers who are a little like that in the world. Maybe great sports coaches or brilliant musicians who take on pupils. And those people in general tend to be really tough. They tend to be people who push their students extremely hard, who expect perfection and who are angry when they don't get it. They tend to be often overbearing, crushing. On the other hand, you get teachers who know how to help someone who is weak and finding things difficult. When I was a kid, for instance, I was so bad at throwing and catching balls, at jumping, at running, I was just terribly coordinated that I had to have extra remedial classes. They took me out of school to teach me these things. I really was quite especially bad. And if I'd had a teacher whose attitude was like that of a great coach, pushing, hammering me, expecting me to give my all and to shout it and yelled every time I failed, I wouldn't have got very far. Fortunately for me, I had someone gentle and lowly in heart. Someone, in other words, who could see how to gently encourage me as I faltered and failed my way through, and who was able to coax out of me, gradually, bit by bit, better and better performance until I was, well, I won't quite say normal, but able to do the things I needed to do. Jesus here is saying he is like that. He is gentle and humble in heart. We're not to be afraid to come to this teacher because he's harsh or overbearing. He's not a driven taskmaster. He's not the boss who expects you to be there all hours. He is gentle and humble in heart. He knows how to gently encourage you, lead you, teach you, even though you are not the perfect pupil. Even though you fail all the time, he is able to lead you in that. That is the kind of teacher Jesus is, a gentle teacher. Secondly, we see who Jesus teaches. If Jesus was a great teacher of the violin or a great sports coach, there's no question who he'd teach. He'd teach the best. He'd teach the people who were brilliant, who'd already showed that they had superb talent, who were brilliantly hardworking, who poured every ounce of muscle, fibre, time and sweat into what they did. But Jesus is not like that. He says, "Come to me, all you who are weary and burdened." He wants, in other words, everyone who will benefit to come to him. Everyone who is tired, everyone who is discouraged, everyone who's struggling is to come to him. Certainly those who are burdened with a consciousness of their own failure and sin, but really all of us who are lacking in the rest we know we ought to have. He wants those who will benefit, and he wants everyone who will come to come. Now, that doesn't mean, of course, that you can just pop in and out of class whenever you like. That's what "take my yoke on me" means. It means to submit, to be willing to do things his way. But nonetheless, he is willing to take absolutely anyone. And if they are weary, if they are tired, if they are struggling, they are invited. That is the kind of people that Jesus teaches. Thirdly, let's look for a moment at what Jesus teaches. This is the part that so often we miss out. Right before that marvellous invitation, Jesus says these breathtaking words. "All things have been committed to me by my Father. No one knows the Son except the Father, and no one knows the Father except the Son, and those to whom the Son chooses to reveal him." That is what Jesus is offering when he says that we are to come to him and learn from him. What he teaches is not mere knowledge, certainly not mere morality. He's not teaching just a way of life. When Jesus teaches us, he is bringing us to know the Father. He is revealing the Father to us. Now, this claim, which of course is unlike anything that is made by the founders of other religions, is precisely what makes Jesus unique. He claims that he can bring us not to know about, but to actually know God in a way that nobody else can, in a way that would be wildly arrogant if he was a mere man. He is genuinely saying there is absolutely no one else and no other way that we can come to know this Father except by him. He has an utterly unique knowledge of the Father, just as the Father has an utterly unique knowledge of him. But he will reveal the Father in a way that leads us to know him. Those who come and submit and learn from him, however weary and burdened and struggling they may be, will come to know the Father. They will come to know the God they were made to know in the first place. That is what this offer is all about. When Jesus calls us and says, "Come to me," he is saying, "Come, and I will introduce you to the Father. You will have a relationship with God through me. That is what I teach." Finally, let's hear from Jesus what the result of learning in his school is. He tells us that wonderful promise. You will find rest for your souls. You will find rest for your souls, for my yoke is easy and my burden is light. Now, part of that rest is simply that latter part of the statement. My yoke is easy, my burden is light. The way I call you to live, submitting to me, is, if not always immediately, then at least ultimately and in the long run, so much easier, less burdensome, less exhausting, less anxiety provoking than living in our own way. Doesn't often seem like it, but it is true. My yoke is easy and my burden is light. But more than that, Jesus is telling us that we will find rest for our souls because of what he's teaching. He has said that he reveals the Father. And when we come to learn from him, we meet the Father, we meet the God we were made for, and so we find rest. And there's so much wrapped up in those words. There's so much of the Bible we could go and flick to see. There's the great promise of heaven itself, which is often described as rest, and is very much included in this promise. Come and learn from Jesus, take his yoke on you. You will have that ultimate, everlasting rest. Not idleness, of course. We'll be busy in heaven, but we'll be rested, always. And even in the present, we will have the rest of knowing God. Now, I used to live on perhaps the richest street in Europe by net worth. When I lived there, and I want to stress I didn't own a house there or pay market rent there either, there were two kinds of people. The people you never saw because they worked all day. That's why they were rich. And then there were a few others, whether it's inherited wealth or wives who stayed home while their husbands worked. And written on their faces, you saw the very opposite of rest. You saw anxiety, discouragement, depression, fear, loneliness. All of these things etched deep into their faces. And I think it is as well as the richest, it was the saddest place I've ever lived. Walking around the streets was not a cheerful experience if you really looked at people's faces. But on the other hand, I can think of Christians lying in busy, noisy hospital beds dying, who have been full of rest. I can think of Christians in the middle of manically busy work that never stops, full of rest. The rest he offers it's ultimately the rest of heaven. But even now, in this life, we have the rest of being able to turn aside from doing things our own way and always worrying if we've got it right. To be confident in him, be confident that he has it all sorted in the end. That we know the Father who will take us to the end, who loves us regardless of how much we mess up. The rest he offers is a rest that spreads through every corner of our lives. Jesus Christ, as a teacher, offers the rest of knowing God, now and always. Now let's close with a prayer. Dear Father, so much of the time, so often we are weary, discouraged, or anxious, and a million miles from rest. And I pray that you would let us hear this call of yours to submit to you, to learn from you, and to receive the rest you offer. And we do look forward to that wonderful day when you will give us truly everlasting rest. I pray that this week you will keep us joyful and rested in you, whatever we have to face, so that we may serve you wholeheartedly and love you with our whole selves. Amen.